Hello, welcome. My name is Ryan, and I'm a guide here at Hearst Castle on a very windy day at the monument. William Randolph Hearst was a lifelong collector of art, antiques, and antiquities. And this was a passion that he gained from a very young age when his mother, Phoebe, took him on an 18-month grand tour of Europe when he was just 10 years old. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been on an 18-month vacation before. This is where William Randolph Hearst was first able to see firsthand castles and palaces and royal gardens, and he fell in love with medieval architecture, and it's from the inspiration he gained on this first trip as a young boy that inspired everything that we see here on the estate. His mother Phoebe was also very influential on him, modeling for him very important contributions that women were making during that time period as well. Phoebe Apperson Hearst was the first female regent on the board of directors at UC Berkeley. She was a funder of archaeological expeditions, and she was a collector of art and antiquities herself. Now today, I have the pleasure of being able to spend some time with you here in the gardens, one of the more relaxing ways that William Randolph Hearst and his guests would have been able to spend their time here. In fact, William Randolph Hearst loved his garden. You could have found him out here on any given day, roaming amongst the various trees, flowers, and sculptures. And also along the way, I'm going to be mentioning some of the ancient art objects that William Randolph Hearst collected over the years. Before we get started, though, I do need to mention some important information. Currently, all California state parks, museums, visitor centers, and parking lots are currently closed due to coronavirus. There are certain California state parks, trails, and beaches still open. However, we do encourage you to stay in your local area. If you do happen to get out to one of these locations, we encourage you to practice safety by maintaining 6 feet of physical distancing, not only for your own safety, but for the safety of others around you. Of course, this information is all subject to change from day to day, so please, for all current and updated information, you can find it at parks.ca.gov. Now, I am standing next to San Simeon's finest example of an ancient sarcophagus. What is a sarcophagus? Well, that is a good question. You know, it's not uncommon for me to be roaming around the hilltop here and seeing people standing, wondering what these are. Large bathtubs, water troughs. And if I didn't know what this was, that would be the most logical guess. But if you look up the word sarcophagus in the dictionary, you'll get a definition along the lines of a stone coffin with sculptures or inscriptions on the outside associated with the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Rome, and Greece. So that's exactly what this is. A sarcophagus is a stone coffin or a vessel for a coffin for burial, and usually, but not always, placed above the ground. In ancient Egypt, they would embalm the deceased body and then wrap it in linen wrap, a process known as mummification, and then the mummy would be placed in the sarcophagus. Sarcophagus, literally, the word translates to flesh eating. Also in ancient Egypt, the early sarcophagi were designed for the pharaohs and reflected the architecture of their palaces. And it was important for the Egyptians, they believed that remembering the person's name would ensure that they would be able to live on in the afterlife. So often inscriptions of the person's name would be on the outside of the sarcophagus as well. And sometimes they would have treasure placed inside the sarcophagus, such as gold even. And then the sculptures on the outside was meant to record the accomplishments of the person's life. Now this is not an Egyptian sarcophagus, this is an ancient Roman sarcophagus. 3rd century, estimated to have been built between 230 and 250 AD, so it is quite old. And the sculptures here on the outside depict Apollo, Athena, and the 9 muses, all children of Zeus, the supreme deity of the ancient Greeks, the gods to the heavens, of the heavens. Now, Apollo was the young Greek handsome god of music and poetry, amongst other things. And his sister here, Athena, was the goddess of war and wisdom. And she's often depicted wearing armor, carrying a spear. Sometimes you'll see her riding a chariot with 4 horses. Now, the muses here all represent the arts and sciences. Each muse represents some pursuit of artistic or scientific or academic endeavor. And some of my favorites are Thalia here, who is the muse of comedy, and she holds a mask and a hunting stick. If you're interested in the theater, you've definitely seen the comedy tragedy masks, and you can see those depicted here on the sarcophagus. Erato here is the muse of love and lyrical poetry. She holds what's called a lyre, L-Y-R-E, which is a stringed musical instrument. It looks sort of like a harp or a guitar. And in her right hand here, she holds a plectrum, which is a tool to strum or pluck the strings of that instrument. Now towards the end here, we've got Urania, the muse of astronomy. She holds a sphere in her left hand, and next to her, her sister Clio, the muse of history, with a tablet and a stylus. The word muse means to meditate or think upon something, but in this case, a muse is a form of inspiration for a poet, artist, or a great thinker in order for them to produce their best work. A muse is usually depicted as a goddess, but it doesn't have to be. Your muse could be the moon, the stars, a beautiful sunset, or the ocean. Whatever it is that inspires you to create a work of art. We use derivatives of the word muse all the time. We don't really think about it, but music, amusement, museum, all derive from the word muse. This particular sarcophagus was once owned by a prince, the Prince Maffeo Colonna di Sciarra in Rome. It was handed down to a cousin of his in the Barberini family in the early 1800s, and then the family negotiated with the Italian government in order to have certain works of art imported and exported, and that's when this was able to be auctioned off at the 1910 Charles T. Yerkes auction held by the American Art Association in New York, and that's when William Randolph Hearst was able to acquire it in his collection. During the time of the Renaissance, if you were wealthy, it was fairly common for you to collect ancient sarcophagi and grace them in your garden. And it's no coincidence to me that William Randolph Hearst was building his version of a Mediterranean Renaissance hilltop town here and also gracing his garden with these ancient art objects as well. Now, we are on the North Esplanade, opposite the smallest of the three guest cottages here, Casa del Monte. This estate was constructed over the course of 28 years, from 1920 to 1948, and the first structures to break ground here were the three guest cottages. Now, William Randolph Hearst could have some fairly unrealistic ideas from time to time. All three of these guest cottages were started at the same time in February of 1920. Well, he anticipated that all three of them would be completed by the summer of 1920. Well, that didn't happen. Casa del Monte here is the smallest of the three, and this wasn't completed for use until the summer of 1921. And it is the first house that he and his wife Millicent slept in here on the hilltop while construction was ongoing. Now we are walking on what's called the Esplanade. The Esplanade was originally intended to be a roadway for cars. William Randolph Hearst soon decided against that, remarking that it would become a nuisance, if not a menace. So then it was transformed into a bit of a promenade for people to enjoy the gardens. And it also serves to connect the main house, Casa Grande, to the three guest cottages as well. The Esplanade encircles the entire estate. One lap around the Esplanade is a quarter mile, similar to a track. So Casa del Sol here is the middle-sized guest cottage. All three of the guest cottages are named for the views that they provide from their sitting rooms. Casa del Monte provides a view of the Santa Lucia Mountains. Casa del Sol here, a view of the sunset. This is Casa del Mar. This is the largest of the three guest cottages, over twice the size of the smallest. And this was the house that was originally designed and constructed to be the family residence, to house William Randolph Hearst, his wife Millicent, and his 5 boys, George, Bill Jr., John, and the twins, Randy and David. And then right outside the back door here of Casa del Mar, you have another sarcophagus. We don't know as much about this sarcophagus as we do some of the others. Hearst Castle has been a historical monument since 1958. And William Randolph Hearst has thousands of art objects here on the hilltop. So over the years, experts have come up here and evaluated his collection. So even though we do not know the origin and date of this particular sarcophagus, we do have a few hunches. We do believe it to be ancient Roman, due to the way that the sarcophagus has been constructed, particularly because of the pillow that has been carved in the inside here. But many of these sarcophagi were created plain on the outside, and in the 19th century it became a fairly popular thing for a sculptor to create a relief or a sculpture on the outside to make these more desirable for collecting. So that's what we believe this is. We believe it to be an ancient Roman sarcophagi, but with this relief on the outside that has been added much later. So this is a modified version. But it is interesting to see how it has changed over the centuries. And this sarcophagus sits right underneath a sculpture, a copy of a very famous sculpture by the neoclassical sculptor Antonio Canova of the Three Graces. The first version of this sits in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. The Three Graces are all daughters of Zeus, Aglaia, Euphrosyne, and Thalia, representing beauty, mirth, and elegance. And where have we seen Thalia before? Well, she was one of the muses on the sarcophagus. She was the muse of comedy. Now, if you were a very wealthy collector 100 years ago, like William Randolph Hearst was, and you couldn't get your hands on the real thing, then you would commission a copy. And the majority of the sculptures that you will find here in the gardens at Hearst Castle are 1920s Art Deco copies of antique or ancient sculptures, made out of marble and pristinely kept, as you can see. Now, this is just a personal opinion of mine, but I think this is one of the most spectacular views from the hilltop. We're on the south side. We can see all the way down to San Simeon Bay, which is a natural deep water bay. Theoretically, William Randolph Hearst ships could have been coming in at all hours, dropping off building materials and antiques. He had a pier down there and warehouses, a school, and housing for the people who worked up here on the hilltop. With our theme of ancient civilizations, we are standing in front of the oldest antiquities on the entire estate. These are 4 sculptures of Sekhmet. They are Egyptian. They are 18th and 19th dynasties. Each one of these sculptures is over 3,000 years old. Sekhmet was the Egyptian goddess of war with the head of a lion and the body of a woman. She was the bloodthirsty protector of the sun god Ra, depicted by the solar shield above her head over here on this side. We believe that at one point all 4 of these may have had a solar shield above their heads. Made out of diorite, a very hard form of granite rock, which is why she can exist out here in the elements like this, once overlooking the Nile River and now overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Sekhmet sits on a modern fountain that was designed by the architect that William Randolph Hearst hired up here to construct all of this, Julia Morgan. And Julia Morgan, she displayed the lotus blossom motif here on this fountain, which represents the sun, creation, and rebirth. You know, this estate was very much built to look and feel old, but with all the modern conveniences of life. So everywhere you look, you're looking at things that are hundreds and even thousands of years old, and it's all mixed very seamlessly with modern work. And if you were to be a guest here at Mr. Hearst's estate, you would be dropped off at the south roundabout down here, walked up these stairs, and on your way up to the main house, Casa Grande. If you can believe it, when William Randolph Hearst first conceived of building something here on the hilltop, it was a pretty modest idea at first. It was going to be a California-style bungalow. He went to meet with Julia Morgan in 1919, met her in her office in San Francisco, sat down with her and said, "Miss Morgan, I'm tired of going up there and camping in tents." This was the land that William Randolph Hearst's father George brought him up to as a young boy, camping, riding horses, and he fell in love with this land. And he once wrote to his mother and said, "I'd rather spend a month here than anywhere else in the world." So this place was very nostalgic for William Randolph Hearst, and it was one of the main reasons he wanted to build here in the first place. But that modest idea here definitely evolved and turned into what we can see from this perspective. His ultimate intended vision of a Mediterranean Renaissance hill town with the main building, Casa Grande, serving or resembling a church or a cathedral at the highest point on the hill. And then, many Mediterranean hill towns, you'll have residences at slightly lower elevations represented by the 3 guest cottages, and then on the outskirts you'll have oftentimes ancient Roman or Greek ruins, which are represented here as well by the outdoor Neptune pool. And Asia, actually, who is filming me right now, did a wonderful presentation about the Neptune pool, which I do encourage you check out on this channel. Here we are at the final sarcophagus we'll be talking about today. This sarcophagus is even older than the muses. 2nd century, estimated to have been built between 160 and 170 AD. And the sculptures on the outside of this sarcophagus represent a battle between the Amazons and the Greeks called the Attic War. The Amazons were a very fierce race of warrior women, very skilled with the bow and horsemanship. And they were led by Princess Penthesilea. And the Amazons invaded Athens in an attempt to rescue Princess Penthesilea's sister, Hippolyta, who was captured by a Greek hero being held captive. But they were defeated. Princess Penthesilea shows up again during the Trojan War, fighting on the side of Troy, and she is killed by none other than Achilles. Achilles spies her from across the battlefield, slaughtering many Greeks, and he is drawn to her like a moth to a flame, stalking her through the battlefield until they come face to face, at which point he falls in love with her, not only because of her fierceness in battle, but because she is so beautiful. And they fight, and Achilles emerges the victor, as Princess Penthesilea falls dead in his arms. If you've ever seen the movie Troy, starring Brad Pitt as Achilles, then you would have seen aspects of the Trojan War there being depicted. But these stories have been told and retold throughout the ages, and there are different variations of them. I think it's important to note that this was not a common form of inhumation between the 2nd and 4th centuries. These were very expensive to commission, so they were reserved for the very wealthy. And it took a long time to make these. So these might be commissioned long before they were actually needed. They are made out of lasting materials, marble and limestone, because they were intended to last an eternity. I can only speak for the 9 examples we have here at Hearst Castle, but so far so good. Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I hope you got something out of this. I'd like to leave you with a quote that has been attributed to Plato, the Greek philosopher. However, now I think there's some dispute as to whether he said this at all, but it doesn't really matter because the sentiment remains the same. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. I would suspect that these days that is doubly true. As much as it is an honor to come to you through these virtual means, it is really no replacement for the real thing, and we really do look forward to the day when we can have you come up here face to face so we can have these conversations in person. We hope that that is sooner than later, and until then, please stay safe, be kind to each other, and we'll see you soon.